So, well, first of all, Chavez, what is this cartoon? What conflict is this cartoon depicting? We referenced it at the end of class on Tuesday. What conflict, what do these two guys do we think represent?
Is it that like some of the southern people?
Nope.
No.
Okay. Christoph says Reconstruction.
It's like how like the president and the
Keep going, Christoph. God, you've been amazing the last 2
how the
weeks.
president and the Congress used Reconstruction.
Okay, so here we have the president. Who's the president?
Grant.
Johnson. Grant's next. You're fine. Not wrong. And then here's Congress. Who disagrees the most with Johnson on Reconstruction? What part of Congress? What group in Congress? Good, good. So we have the radical Republicans over here. Yes. We have examples of Johnson vetoing their bills like the Civil Rights Act. Good. The Freedmen's Bureau extension. Good. So we see this significant, this is all of today's conversation is really built up in this conflict. That's why I told you on Tuesday I'll start class with this cartoon because it's a good cartoon. It's not top 5. It's not top 10.
Top 30?
I'll give you top 30. I'll give you top 30. And what's the problem that this cartoon is demonstrating? It's right there in front of you. It's right there in front of you. Cortez, take a shot at it, kid.
They're on the same track.
They're on the same track, so they're on in the same lane trying to fight about Reconstruction. But which specific Reconstruction conflict is being demonstrated in this cartoon? No, not infrastructure, because they're on a train. I get that. We're building the South? I don't think Johnson or Congress really cares about that. Integrating what? This flag says 36, not 25 states. It is what that says. So what is that implying is the true conflict of these two groups during Reconstruction? No, not expansion at all.
It's how they bring it back in.
Yeah, the integration of the 11 southern states, it's an 11 state difference, back into the Union. Keep in mind, Johnson wants to get these states back into the Union quickly. He doesn't want to punish the South. Johnson's still living on that 10% plan idea, integrating these southern states back in quickly, because Johnson knows if these southern states don't come back in, what can the Republicans keep doing in Congress? Yeah, whatever they want. Passing laws, passing bills, doing whatever they want. Johnson, as a Democrat, understands that adding these 11 states, the southern states, back into the Union as quickly as possible is the only real way to counter Republican power. Yes, sir?
But was there that one Davis bill where, like, if you were a leader, you can't be in
Uh-huh. What happened with the Wade Davis bill?
It was vetoed.
Lincoln vetoed it. Yeah. Lincoln vetoed it. So, then he died. He gone. So, Tuesday we killed Lincoln. Today we're going to kill Reconstruction. And with it, truly, any hope for black Americans in the South. We're going to have a 13-year period that's like the golden age for black progress. Education, political rights, representation, social progress, and it's all going to go away like this. For a variety of reasons. Reason one, you can't legislate morality. You can't fix society by passing more laws. You can't make people learn by making things illegal. Reason two, the North kind of gets over it. At a certain, tell me why this is a real teacher analogy. At a certain point, you can't fix a student that doesn't think that they're broken. I can tell you 1,000 times, hey, do your homework, it'll help. Do your homework, it'll help. Talk to you, hey, when you did your homework, did it help? Yeah, that was awesome. I felt really good in class. Next class, no homework. Right? You can't fix something that doesn't want to be fixed. For some of you, I can keep beating my head on the wall all year. It doesn't mean I'm going to fix you. You can keep trying to fix the South, but if the South doesn't want to be fixed, because they don't think they're broken, It's impossible. So at a certain point, and that's for today's conversation. So this is a good cartoon because it really demonstrates this conflict of Reconstruction from the congressional side and the presidential side. Now the fun part about today is Congress is going to make Johnson absolutely worthless. Powerless. The most powerless position for a president to be in. But we'll get there for today as well. So today we're talking about Congressional Reconstruction, when Congress takes over Reconstruction. And then also Reconstruction's end, which is done in 1877. Our prompt is how much does Reconstruction accomplish its goals? This is kind of one of your thesis questions for the homework. And you could really say that short term, very successful. We got black guys in office, African Americans voting, the Freedmen's Bureau, we're making progress. Long term, minimal to zero extent. Because the South, quote unquote, redeems itself. Comes back to what the South always was. So let's get cracking today because I want to make sure that we really honor the fact that this is our last day of content and there's a lot to get to. So society has a lot of problems. The war is over. Who won the war? The Union wins the war. The North wins the war. Now, there's a significant amount of historians that I would agree with that argue, it's kind of a good phrase to get your mind around what's happening today. The Union wins the war. That's not disputable, unless you ask some Southerners. And Southern wins again. The Union wins the war. The Confederacy wins the peace. Think about that. The Union wins the war. The Confederacy wins the peace. Interesting. So, a lot of questions after the war that need to be solved. Societal questions, political questions, economic questions. We referenced these on Tuesday as well. But the big question is, the war is over, now what? Kind of like the Revolutionary War. I gave you that quote. The war is over, well, who amongst us should govern? Who should have the power? We won, but what's next? Sometimes you could argue that the war is the easy part. Revolutionary War, that was the easy part. Civil War, that was the easy part. The hard part becomes like, what do we do next? What's the next step for society? What's the next step for our political system? When the Revolutionary War happened, the next step was like, how do we create a government from scratch? Articles, did they win or lose the articles? Well, they're terrible. But that question became like, what next? The Civil War, like, okay, we won this war for union. We ended slavery. We freed all these big things happened, but oh my God, what next? How do we deal with what's next? The South is destroyed. The South is destroyed physically. Thank you, Sherman. The South is destroyed socially. 20% of the South's military-age young men are dead. It's a massive chunk. Of course, more Northerners die, but a way bigger chunk of Southern society dies because they have less people. A huge chunk of the white male population is dead. Economically, the South is absolutely in ruins. Hyperinflation. I told you about that during the war, right? They're printing money at such a rate that they have zero weight behind their money, and now their money's worth even less because there's no Confederate States of America anymore. They have no resources. They have no trade. They have no industrialization. Whose fault is all this? They have no commerce. They have no business. They have no banking system to loan out money to rebuild things. They have no slaves. They're like, oh, don't worry. We'll just go back to relying on cotton. Hey, England, you want some of our cotton? England's like, y'all hear something? We're over here in Egypt, India, doing our thing, getting our... So a lot of things go really poorly for the South economically. Now, this is not to have you feel sorry for the Confederacy, because whose fault is all of this? Yeah. Long term, it's their fault for never industrializing, never attracting a larger population, always relying on cotton. Short term, it's their fault for, I don't know, seceding, relying fully on cotton to win the war, in a sense. Create a system based on state rights. And so these Southern whites have this idea of this lost cause, which I have a really good video clip of. I'll show you in the class if we have time. If not, I'll show you after school. From my personal favorite Civil War historian. His name is Gary Gallagher. He taught for 30 years at the University of Virginia. I spent a week with him 2 summers ago at one of those summer history institutes that I like to attend as a giant nerd. Puts me in touch with my student side, you know. I'm trying to see if I can get him to come talk to our class at some point this year. Because he's spending a week at the Huntington Library in Pasadena, a year at the Huntington Library in Pasadena. So I'm seeing if I can arrange some sort of Civil War talk from Gary Gallagher, because he's in my opinion, the top 3 Civil War historians in American history. So, of the living ones.
Who's top one?
Top 5?
He's for sure. Oh, he's top. What's up?
Who's top one?
Eric Foner, who you guys see in the videos. He's fantastic. Gary Gallagher, and ooh,
Top two?
Craig Mitchell. So, Craig and Mitchell. There's 4 million slaves, Matthew, but they are freed into, it's hilarious, some way worse conditions short-term for slaves. Their families are all broken up. As bad as slavery was, at least they were fed. They have no way to get food, no way to get resources, no way to get housing. They have nowhere to go. The slaves turn into this vagabond society of just landless, directionless, rudderless institution. And a lot of them want to just stay where they are and get their hands on some land and start doing what they've always done. There's no real desire in mass in Southern slavery to leave the South because they don't really know where else to go or what else to do. All they've known their entire existences is agriculture, is Southern society. So the big hope for freed slaves is just a little bit of land. There's this phrase that becomes popularized called 40 acres and a mule. All slaves are desiring is some land, 40 acres, and a mule to work it. As we know, the South has plenty of mules. We're a little limited in the donkey department, the horse department. So that becomes a question as well. But what the big, huge question becomes this, it's a good phrase for today, competing notions of freedom. What is freedom for this group? How does that compete with freedom for this group? And how does that compete with freedom for that group? Brett, what is freedom to you, sir?
Liberty, being able to abide by the law, but also reach my full potential.
Yeah, so freedom for different groups means different things. And that's never been more true than in Southern society post-Civil War. Freedom for African Americans equals land. That's it. African Americans say, I cannot be free until I can own this land, profit from this land, work on this land like I have been for the last, as their people, 400 years, and do something about it. This idea being that if I can't live like a white male, then I am not free. Are they freed from slavery? Yes. But that's not all there is to freedom. This is going to be the beginning of a long journey for African Americans, and we'll talk about a lot in this class. There's different kinds of freedom. There's economic freedom. Being able to work, make whatever money you want, and spend it how you want. That's economic freedom. But there's also political freedom. What's political freedom? Suffrage, holding office. Yeah. There's social freedom. You want to go where you want, express yourself how you want. Cultural freedom. Being able to express your culture. And there'll be different phases, and this is a nice little place to introduce this. Different phases in American history where there's different kinds of freedom for African Americans that all culminates with the Civil Rights Movement. Right? The Harlem Renaissance, those of you who've heard about that. That's an example of cultural freedom, where African Americans are for the first time being encouraged to embrace their culture and express it. So, this is first things first for African Americans, though, comes economic freedom. They want to own land, work land, and make money like a white person. For the white people in the South, though, this notion of freedom is opposite. They want freedom from what? Yeah, they want freedom from northern intervention. But question for you. Can the black people have their freedom and own land without federal government intervening?
No.
No. Can the white people have their freedom with the federal government there?
No.
So here we go. That's my point. It's a headbutt example of black people can't have their freedom while white Southerners have their freedom as well. Because there's this competing freedom for one means freedom for the other one can't have it. So the big white solution is to try to keep black freed slaves, black workers, legally stuck to their plantations, to try to recreate the plantation system post-slavery. To try to recreate the system in which you have lifetime labor you don't have to pay, but you do so without slavery. They're going to do so with an economic system called sharecropping, and they're going to do so with a legal system called black codes, limiting where black people can go, limiting who they can marry, limiting who they can associate with, limiting their educational opportunities. So you're doing all the things that slavery did, but instead of doing so with like a rigid social structure, you're doing so with laws. And this is only possible because right after Lincoln's death, we have Johnson as president, and he's really hands-off on the South. He's letting the South kind of do their own thing. So for this 2-year window from 1865 and 1866, 67, we have the sharecropping system being created and black codes being created to reinforce it, of limiting what black people can do legally. So what is sharecropping? Basically, sharecropping is a cycle of agricultural poverty. Let's give an analogy here. Chris owns the land. Obviously, look at the guy. Just screams landowner. Luis works on his land. You make a bad hiring choice. So, who's the landowner in this scenario? Chris. Shut up, I didn't ask you. Chris is the landowner. Does Luis have any money? No. No, Luis has just been freed from bondage. Luis has no way to make any money. In the South, can he go to the bank and get a loan? No, there's no banking system. So what he's going to do is Luis is going to go to Chris and be like, hey, how about this? If you loan me some land, loan me some seeds, loan me some tools, when do farmers make their money?
When they sell it.
Louder?
When they sell it.
When they sell their crops. When does that happen? Harvest season, once a year. She said, and then when I harvest all my crops, cotton, whatever it is, then I'm going to sell those crops and then I'll pay you back. So far, so good? Who wins in this scenario? Both. On the surface, they both win. Because he gets labor, and he gets a chance to make some money, and access to things he couldn't buy because he has no liquid capital, he has no money. He can't buy the seeds, he can't buy the land, he can't buy the tools. He's going to borrow it. The problem comes, he's going to give him half his crop. So far, so good? You guys with me so far? Problem becomes, what happens when he needs food? Who's he going to buy it from? What do you guys think? He's going to buy it from Chris. What happens when he needs clothes? Chris. What if he needs a doctor's appointment? Chris. Okay, so now what's Chris going to do? He's going to start a tab, basically. And then, okay, cool, it was 50%, now it's 60%, now it's 70%. Because you all season long, you got to live your life. Now what happens then if the prices go down a little bit? He can't make his money. Or the season is bad. What happens at the end of the year if he owes Chris more than he makes? Now what? Yeah. He's like, okay, cool. Well, then you'll have to work it off next year. Or when Chris decides, you know what? I gave you a lot this year. You have to give me all your crop. What power does he have in this relationship? Nothing. So economically, I'm going to say that sharecropping is a system of economic slavery. That you end up stuck on the system because you have no way to start business for yourself because you're always stuck with somebody else. Even if there's a good year, he grows all this cotton, life is good, and he settles up and he's even with Chris, what's his option for next year? Same thing. Same thing. So this sharecropping system means that eventually you're just stuck there because you owe so much money, you owe so much crop that you can't go anywhere else. Now, post-Civil War, about 50% of white farmers are stuck in the same system. It's not just black people. That poor white class, they're stuck in the same system of sharecropping as well. But it's 75% of black farmers end up stuck in the sharecropping system of economic slavery.
Do white farmers get cheated?
Do white farmers get cheated? Absolutely. Yeah, not as bad, not nearly as bad, because of social. It's a good question. Yes, if white farmers get cheated. And this isn't even necessarily always a system of cheating. It's a system of math. Right? The numbers game just puts you behind the 8 ball. So we see a bunch of, it's called the crop lien system, where you're borrowing crops to then pay back when you farm the crops, or tenant farming. Tenants are obviously renters. So the system together is referred to as sharecropping. We do see, though, as an important term that's going to make a little bit of a difference later, called exodusters. Exodusters. And that's black farmers who leave slavery, take advantage of the Homestead Act, and go settle on the frontier. We see a good amount of black farmers, not a huge amount, but enough to make a little difference, of freed black slaves leaving the sharecropping system and taking advantage of the Homestead Act to move out to the Kansases and the Nebraskas and the Colorados of the world. So it really is the first little chip away of black migration from the South. Now, why does sharecropping work, Noe? Why does this system of labor work?
Like for who? For who?
Why, as a system of labor, yeah.
Because it went to newly free.
Yeah. There's a ton of black labor with no other real options. No other real options. And who's there to make the white people treat them well? During Johnson's presidency, who's there? Nobody. Question, what laws are even there to try to force them to be equal? Nothing. At this point, all we have is the 13th Amendment ending slavery. Here we are. And this is what gives us the radical Republicans, who we already referenced. The two you should know, Thaddeus Stevens, he's a badass. And oh, guess who's back? Charles Sumner. He's finally recovered from his beating with the cane. He's back. He is in the Senate. He is doing his thing. He is recovered. And he thought he was radical before. Well, now he's more angry because he got beat over the head with a cane. And now he's like, see, I told you guys. I told you slavery was bad. I took a beating for it. Which is kind of fun because we just had a midterm election about 2 weeks ago. What do you elect in midterm elections? Not the president. Yeah, House of Representatives and the Senate. So in this midterm election of 1866, 1 year after Lincoln's dead, who's president? Johnson's president. The Republicans have an overwhelming victory. Overwhelming victory. They run on this idea, it's pretty good actually, that not every Democrat was a rebel. What does it mean by rebel? Yeah, not every rebel was a Confederate, but every Confederate was a Democrat. Think about it. Not every Democrat seceded, but everybody that did was a Democrat. Implying, who should you vote for? Republicans. Yeah, so they have a huge electoral victory in 1866 on this idea, which gives them it's more of a government conversation for the next 2 minutes, a supermajority in both houses of Congress. Let me show you what I mean. So, what are the two houses of Congress? House and the Senate. Okay, so the House is based on what? Population. And the Senate is based on? 2 per. So a supermajority, what's a majority, first of all? Yeah, 50% plus 1. A supermajority is a 2/3 majority. They have a 2/3 majority in both. Now with a 2/3 majority, let me tell you what we could do. Who passes laws? Congress. And then where does their law go? Who has to agree to it? President. We talked about other presidents like Jackson, who vetoes things. The bank, for example. So say the law goes to the president. Who's the president right now? Johnson. So everything these Republicans are going to do, what is Johnson going to do with it? He's going to veto it. The problem for Johnson is they have a 2/3 majority. After the president vetoes something, put it back with a veto, Congress can override that veto. Congress can say, screw your veto. We don't care, we're passing the law anyway, if they have 2/3 of the House and the Senate. It almost never happens in society. Right now, for example, like the House and Senate are divided on just a few votes. That's normally how it works. But because of this midterm election and Republican momentum from winning the war, they have a what's called a veto-proof majority. Now they can pass whatever law they want. Johnson can veto it, they can say, cool, we're overriding it. Override, 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 override. What does this make Johnson? Absolutely powerless. They could pass a bill that says every day at 8 a.m., President Johnson needs to run around the block of the White House butt-ass naked. He'd be like, that's ridiculous. I'm vetoing that bill. And they'd be like, cool, good for you. Override. Get running. Hope it's not a cold day. So, think about that, though. Because of this 2/3 majority, what can Congress now do?
Anything.
Whatever they want. And this is what ushers in radical Reconstruction or Congressional Reconstruction. Because now they have the power to exert whatever authority they want on Southern society.
Wait, so
Just like during the war.
this is the part where they get a harsh on the
Just like during the war, but different because now they have a veto-proof majority that now Lincoln vetoed the Wade Davis bill. Now they could have even overridden that.
Oh yeah, it's like the more power.
More power. So now Congress literally has all the power in government. Because it does not matter what Johnson says, they can just override or cancel out his veto. Oh, cool, you don't like that bill? Good for you, nobody asked. Override. Oh, you don't like us punishing the South? Cool, sucks to be you. Override. Oh, you don't think black people should have equal rights? Cool, nobody asked you. Override. Oh, you don't run around the White House butt-ass naked? Ah, cool, too bad. Override. Should have been in better shape. So this is what brings in phase 3 of Reconstruction. Phase 1, of course, being Lincoln during the war. Phase 2 being Johnson. Phase 3 is radical Republicans in Reconstruction. And one of the first things they do is pass the Reconstruction Act of 1867. Very important. And this is military Reconstruction. They're going to divide the South into 5 military districts. It's kind of like martial law. And they're going to send... No, you're not. You ask Chris, look at you so you can do something stupid. Chris is too good for this. Do you want to come teach class? No. Okay, then shut the hell up. So, we're going to divide the South into 5 military districts. It equates to an extent to martial law, and we're going to send the U.S. Army there to enforce order. The South's like, I thought the Civil War was over. The South just getting cracking. They got sharecropping. They got these black codes going. Like, all right, cool. We're good. We got this. Then here comes the Army. What? They're going to make sure that every new state, when they submit their new state constitution to come back into the Union, their state constitutions have to be approved by Congress. Who's in Congress? Radical Republicans. Oh, your new state wants to not let black people vote in your state? Cool, reject it. Beat it. Write a new one. Oh, your new state constitution has these black codes in it? No, it doesn't. Try again. They're going to guarantee black suffrage. That will not just be guaranteed by the law. Black suffrage will be guaranteed by the military. It will be the U.S. Army that is there to make sure you let black people vote. And they're going to ensure that every single state, before they come back into the Union, has ratified or approved the 14th Amendment. What is the 14th Amendment, you want to ask? That's the next slide. And it was in your homework. So these Reconstruction Acts of 67, they put all the power on Congress, and this is the much more extreme, harsh punishment of the South that people like Brett were asking for on Tuesday, when Josue was arguing that freeing the slaves was enough punishment. Now that you know this idea of sharecropping and black codes, do you guys think that freeing the slaves was enough punishment for the South? No. Yeah, because nothing is resolved. Jose changed his mind. It's okay, that's a sign of maturity. Unlike this. True. The next thing they do is arguably the most important, I would say, amendments in American history. The only one that holds a candle to them is the Equal Rights Amendment for women that does not get passed. We'll talk about that in period 8. So the 14th Amendment, I should say 1866, I apologize. The 14th Amendment takes the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which guarantees citizenship for freed slaves, and it turns it into an amendment that you can't take away without another amendment. Now, a law can be changed by just passing another law. An amendment is forever. The only way to change an amendment is to pass a new amendment. It's only happened once in American history. We'll talk about that in period 7. Now, the 14th Amendment is actually a big controversy right now about undocumented immigrants having children here. I don't know why it's a controversy, because you can hear. But the idea here is that anybody born in America, regardless of their former status, anybody born here is a citizen. Done. Citizenship is not granted by the government. Citizenship is granted by you being born in the United States of America. So now all of these former slaves, where were they born? Here. Damn right. And they're now citizens. It's a big deal. And the 2 clauses you need to know are the due process clause, which means every citizen gets due process. Meaning nobody can take away your property, take away your freedom, put you in jail without you having due process, going through the legal process like everybody else does. Going to court, having your case heard, defending yourself. Everybody gets due process. You can't lose life, liberty, or property without due process, without going through the legal system. The second clause worth noting is the Equal Protection Clause. Everybody, all of us, get equal protection of the laws. Laws that protect us protect everybody. That everybody is equal in the eyes of the law. Big deal. This is a big, radical amendment for 1868. This is like huge, huge. 4 years prior, we have slavery in the country. We're not just ending slavery with this amendment. We're guaranteeing constitutional equality. It's a big deal. This really sets America apart from other parts of the world in that we're not just... Now, it's funny because we were the last country to end slavery, really, in the modern world. And then the first country to go, you know what? We're going to take a full 180. Not a 360, that's great, man. Say it. A full 180 and go right into equal citizenship and protection. Big deal. Due process and equal protection. It also goes a step further, and the 14th Amendment punishes the South. It says the Confederate leaders can never hold office. The states themselves have to pay their own war debt. Oh, I'm sorry, Mississippi. Did you rack up a big debt? Who were you fighting? Oh, the U.S.? Cool, you're on your own. Oh, I'm sorry, South Carolina. Did you borrow a bunch of money to rebuild all those cities we burned down? Sucks to be you. Pay that debt on your own.
Well, you can do all that in one amendment.
Oh, yeah. You're the radical Republicans, you do whatever the hell you want. What's Johnson going to do about it? And it put a clause in that if southern states began disenfranchising black people, they would just lose their electoral college votes. Oh, cool. You want to play games? You don't have a say in the presidency. It says you don't even participate in a real democracy. I know the radical Republicans are playing no games. And yet, and still, the South is still trying to find ways to keep black people from voting. I tell you, like I told you guys on election day, if voting didn't matter, they wouldn't try so hard to keep communities of color from voting. If voting was powerless, they wouldn't care who voted. Since the big they cares this much who votes, it must mean something. It meant something in 1860, it means something in 1960, it'll mean something in 2060. Vote. People die for that right. 2 years later, they passed the 15th Amendment, which says that everybody can vote unless, of course, you are a female, in which case, you thought. Women are like, all right, this is our chance. This is it. This is all citizens. They're like, what citizens? You're a citizen? So for women, it's really unfortunate.
I love when white men talk about women.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't come for this one though. Don't come for this one. So this is the big chance though for women. Women think. Keep in mind, guys, bear with me. Women think that they've been the ones fighting for abolition and equal rights for African Americans all this time. Have they not?
Yeah.
Where does the abolition movement start? With women. With women's rights. And so women really feel left behind by the fact that this amendment excludes them explicitly. And women are still going to wait 50 years for suffrage. Which just goes to show how ridiculous our society is, built on only white male voting, and then all male voting, and then black people get disenfranchised, and there's a lot of people go through it. But the big piece here is you can't lose your right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Previously being a slave. So they can't use all these little things that keep you from voting to keep you from the ballot box. It does not matter.
Unless it's your gender.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you're a gender. All right, cool. So there's a really good cover of a magazine titled Harper's Weekly, which is next on your notes. And this political cartoon, well, it's not one of my favorites. It is very, very emotionally stirring. It's titled The First Vote. The First Vote. Mm-hmm. So, I did show you last year because you had African American studies I should show you last year. So take 2 minutes with your partner. What is the context and point of view of this cartoon? Have a quick conversation. What do you see? What do you notice? What's connotated? It's right here on the board as well. Have a quick chat and get after it.
Basically, like, I guess the right to vote, like, for the 15
Have a quick conversation. What do you see? What do you notice?
On the white line, he's sad. He's sad.
Doesn't want that.
Wouldn't it also be Reconstruction? Because I mean, basically during Reconstruction, things that happened before.
Yeah.
Johnny.
Someone hold my bread.
This way.
Someone's spamming me.
I need both these answered fully in the next minute.
Okay.
But all of a sudden, it's cracking jokes. Why don't you answer the freaking questions? That's fine. Ruby is not here. Make her a stack though. Santos, Slaney. No, don't give me a region. Give me a party.
This is Radical Republic.
Yep, good. That's better. Right, because there's a lot of Northern Democrats that still aren't pro this happening.
Because the Democrats are the ones that are
Red. In a way. And
right?
I didn't see the facts about it.
nope.
No, please. There's
Five,
I have like
cool.
more of this, but I can't.
3, 2, and 1. All right. So, whose point of view is this cartoon drawn from? Christoph, go ahead.
Pro-radical Republic.
Yeah, good. They're depicting suffrage in a positive way. Now look at these African Americans from very different walks of life. We have one that looks a little poorer. He's a little better dressed. Oh, what's back here? A black soldier. So referencing the different places that black people come from in society, but yet all are coming together to the ballot box. Good. Ideally, your context references the 15th Amendment and military reconstruction, since this is obviously a soldier who looks like he is overseeing the balloting process to make sure that black people do in fact have the right to vote. He looks, I don't know who it is, to be honest with you, I'd probably look it up. He looks a little bit like Grant.
Colonel Sanders.
No, not quite Colonel Sanders. Not all people agree like Colonel Sanders. Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, the Union general who oversaw a lot of this happening and takes over the presidency later.
Oh yeah.
He's a good man. He's a crafty president. So some of the clear successes that this is what I want you to see, that demonstrate that short-term Reconstruction is a political success. Proof. Voting rights. Voting rights is proof that African Americans are willing and able to participate in democracy, big deal, and B, do so effectively. Go figure, black people vote Republican almost all the time.
Wait, why? Why did it change?
We'll talk about that in class 2.
Which period?
Well, that's period 7 and 8, the Great Depression, and then the Civil Rights Movement is going to shift African Americans to the Democratic Party, and white Southerners to the Republican Party. But we'll get there. So we have 2 U.S. senators. 2 U.S. senators. The first being from Louisiana, representing in the Senate, which only has at the time 2 per state. A big, big, big deal. But it's funny because if you think about it, like the states that have all these slaves that are now freed, like, oh crap, we're outnumbered. We're also outnumbered electorally. We're outnumbered politically. We're outnumbered. So it's no surprise that we see some black representatives. 14 members of the House get elected. So that's on the national level. But on the state level, it's also really important that we have 630 different state legislatures. So different people that are represented to serve their state: Mississippi, South Carolina, Alabama. People that are making state decisions in the state's legislative branch. 630 of them are elected that are black. That's huge. That's a big number. Louisiana elects their first black governor. And it's sad right now, there's a recount happening in the Florida and the Georgia governor race. They're both very close, the governor race. And Florida specifically was trying to elect their first black governor ever, and the first black governor in the South since Reconstruction. The first black governor in the South. Governor, of course, is like the president of a state, the guy in charge of the executive branch of the state. First black governor in the South since Reconstruction.
Really?
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah, he's losing by about 11,000 votes.
So,
Yep.
Shockingly, yes. Keep that in mind, though, that America has come so far in places like this. America has not come very far racially, politically, and other places. Black people really don't want to, shockingly, they don't want to assimilate into white culture, especially in the South. We see African Americans now free, creating independent churches, independent schools, because they have no desire to become white culture. They want to express their own. Here's an example of African Americans who are freed very proudly, farming cotton on their own terms. We have an example of a Freedmen's Bureau school, of educating African American youths, and the first colored senators and legislators in the. It's a very famous picture, still hangs in Congress today, of those that are first elected in Reconstruction to serve in the House and the Senate. It's pretty badass. It works. Reconstruction works short term. You're right there. Now, the two groups you should know that are influencing the South, both cool names, scalawags and carpetbaggers. This picture is making fun of Carl Schurz. You know his name? Carl Schurz. Yeah, we read his perspective on the South not wanting to be reconstructed on Tuesday in class, which is a whole 48 hours ago. So, good.
Oh, we thought they were unloyal?
Yeah. And then as soon as the military goes away, they're just plotting their next step of revenge. So two groups. Scalawags are Southerners who side with the Republican agenda. So they're seen as traitors to the South. Southerners who get on board with civil rights. Southerners who get on board with government intervention. Southerners who want to see the federal government invest money into like a Clay's American system type economy in the South. Hey, we should try some infrastructure. Hey, y'all heard of banks? Not Mr. Banks. Hold down. Like banking banks. And these people are criticized by white states' rights, Southern South, by being too pro-Northern politically and too pro-Northern economically. This is the best part. Like, whose economy just won the war? Yeah, why did the North win the war? Their economy. A variety of other reasons, but big picture like it. And the South's like, no, we shouldn't do what they do. Y'all tried farming? I think we should probably plant a little bit more cotton. And carpetbaggers are Northerners who are coming to the South to try to get economic opportunity. They're called that because they pack all their belongings in a carpet over a stick. Hey, not actually. But it's like they're bringing all their belongings into the South, trying to profit off of us. Northerners investing in this new South. Some of them are good, that are going there to like teach school and invest in the Freedmen's Bureau and provide aid and help reform. But there are some examples of people that are plundering, trying to get rich quick off of the South's misery. To which I say, well, you shouldn't have had any misery. But, you know, can't win them all. So these two groups are both worth noting as they show up oftentimes in like political cartoons, in perspectives on post-Civil War society that are both worth noting. Now, the South is not going to resist this movement to give African Americans equality very lightly. Keep in mind, they also seceded when a Republican president was elected, who promised not to interfere with slavery where it was. Now they've lost the war, they've lost slavery, and now they've lost their standing legally in the South as the superior race. They're not going to take this well. We see a variety of white supremacy-based paramilitary groups being formed. Groups that operate using military force, using intimidation, using violence, to try to maintain this feeling of societal supremacy. There's this very common phrase of the South will rise again. Of course, it's used by John Wilkes Booth when he shoots Abraham Lincoln. This idea that you're just keeping us down. And we see it present in those documents. That the South's just waiting for their time. They will rise again. They will have their day. We're just waiting. It's very much like the movie Friday. When Devo comes, I'll be quiet. But when you leave, I'll be talking again. We have the creation of the White League, which is an early organization to keep white power politically in the South. And we see the creation of the Ku Klux Klan, which is created in 1867 by a former Confederate general in the Confederate Army, Nathaniel Bedford Forrest. Nathaniel Bedford Forrest. I don't even remember that name because it'll pop up in a good movie down here. And it's this idea of using violence, using intimidation to keep African Americans in a system of subjugation. You can pass the laws, you can send the army, but when you guys aren't looking, we will do whatever we can to ensure that they feel intimidated and they are reminded they are an inferior class in this society. Yes, sir.
Isn't that the same thing, like how they went against the Civil Rights Acts?
It's the exact same thing. This is the first generation of the Klan. There will be 3. This generation of the Klan will go away when Reconstruction goes away. Why? Because mission accomplished. Because Jim Crow laws take their place. There's no need for intimidation if society doesn't let you vote anyway.
Wait, why did they come back? During
Oh, don't worry. 1920s, I'll be back. That time they'll be anti-black, but they'll also be anti-immigrant, anti-Jew strongly, anti-women progress, anti-alcohol. And they'll go away again. And they'll come back with the civil rights movement and be specifically anti-black civil rights. 3 generations of the Klan that are worth noting. And that's our current Klan that's still around today. Congress passes the Enforcement Act of 1870 and 71 in response to the Ku Klux Klan to try to use the army to force the Klan out of power. And it's very successful short term. The army is able to root out a lot of Klan activities because the army's still there in the South thanks to these military Reconstruction Acts. And the Klan loses some of its effectiveness. Now, this is a stellar cartoon. It's very dark. From an artist we're going to see a lot in Period 6, a ton in Period 6, named Thomas Nast. He's phenomenal. A lot of his cartoons are going to actually expose business corruption. But he's going to publish this in 1874, so during Reconstruction. This is top 10. Turn it right down, Elion. This is definitely top 10. And if you want to disagree with me, then you're wrong. But take a minute with your partner and really identify what is Nash trying to get across in this cartoon. Now keep in mind, Nash is not the racist. Nash is portraying the racism. 1 minute, go for it. Chat it out. Chat it out. Chat it out. Chat it out. Oh yeah, next. All right, I lied. We're gonna read first. My bad. Because then I have it in your notes. All right. So this is from a man named Howell Cop. If ever there was a redneck name, Howell Cop is for sure it. And read it. Okay. His title is, of course, An Unreconstructed Southerner. So I think that kind of tells you what his beliefs are. Take 5, please. What is the context of this letter, and what is his point of view regarding Reconstruction? What are his feelings on Reconstruction? What did I say, 5 minutes? Yeah. Go for it. Read it, and then I'll let you discuss. It's good text. Don't worry, it's easy to read. Just read by a Southerner. What's on my list so far? We're going to put together this top 10 of the year, and then figure out if they're all going to agree to get a badass cartoon. Go ahead. Oh, you're just writing this? Where's the rest of them? What? They're on your notes? Oh, dark and amazing. Oh, okay. So dark and amazing image. I'll try them over. Also, amazing. out. Bragging about you this morning.
Once in a while, we talk
I'm just staying house.
Nice.
Because you turn in that way.
wipe your butt regularly.
That was the joke. You missed the text. It's a good one. I have so much work to pass back to you guys. 30 seconds. What?
So while the military was in the South, was the Civil Rights Act?
Yes, is enforced. So you can pass a law, but if you're not going to enforce the law, then what's the point of passing a law? So the military's going to enforce the law. All right, take a minute, please. Talk to your partner. What is this big point of view of our friend Howell Cop here? What is his perspective on Reconstruction and why? 1 minute, chat before we go for it. Go, go, go. I left that opened up so you can see how fantastic the homework was.
Oh, I thought that.
No, that's just me opening your homework and realizing that.
I thought this was a new packet. Oh.
Good, Cortez. Good, Cortez.
No way, all day you're working.
Do that.
This one's good.
Okay, guys, what do you guys think? What do you think?
I know who you are.
Oh, the South is like.
I probably do this so that
No way
anybody's
to
name
cut
is
the
right.
source and
But
not pushing it too far to the point that they're gonna die from this.
So, like,
it was
what
passed
sounds like
and then vetoed and then passed and not enforced. The military's are enforcing. But let's put it out in a law.
he really said, bringing the southern states under the power of
Johnson.
supremacy.
Because they passed the Military Reconstruction Act and put those in more civil. All right. So, talk to me, please, about Mr. Cobb's perspective on Reconstruction. Thank you. Chavez, go for it. Everyone listen to Chavez. He's a beautiful man.
He's making the South be the victim again.
Oh, look at that continuity. The South again playing the victim. Oh my God, poor us. This unfair legislation. Our life is so hard. The military's here. They're making us treat black people like people. God, the humanity. Like victims, absolutely. Jeremy, what else?
He states that that the laws that they're passing are unjust towards the South.
Oh my God, more unjust laws. Good. Very anti-Reconstruction. But do we see? Go ahead. Do you think he's against the 14th Amendment? Oh God, yes. He's going to be against the 14th Amendment, anti-15th Amendment, anti-Civil Rights Act, anti-military Reconstruction, anti-Freedmen's Bureau, anti-everything. Comes as a whole package deal. Package is called redneck. Now, what else? No way. What else is in his perspective about Reconstruction?
Wait, so what they say?
Exactly. Eliam, go for it. What else do we have from Howell Cop here that's worth pointing out?
Well, I was just gonna say that he's against the Northern States are doing their best part for the South, but the South is totally against.
Yeah. That he thinks the South knows best what's best for the South. That'll be a thing forever. Wasn't that a thing for the abolition movements?
Yeah.
Oh, don't tell us what to do with our situations here. Don't do that. The South knows what's best for the South. Christoph.
No, he's also like against having like there on his like. He's also against just having black people in like power, like when it comes to politics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Chai was last one.
He says to make our former slaves our masters, bringing these other states within the power of Congress supremacy.
To make our former slaves our masters. So good.
I stuttered. So I got
So good. This cruel legislation, this harsh enforcement of these unjust laws. Oh no. Oh no. Oh yeah. Cool. All right, so turn your page, please, because I have the cartoon there for you, blown up and large. It is on the board as well. If it's a Winchell top 10, then you got to know it. Oh yeah. This is top 10 and probably borderline top 5.
Oh yeah, baby.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, baby.
So, please, because again. Oh, now you're awake. There's no better representation of the white resistance to Reconstruction than this cartoon. Please take two with your partner. What is the context of this perspective? What is this cartoon's point of view? And what is the purpose of it? 2 minutes. Chat it out. Go for it. Have at it. Get wild.
What?
I like how he's smiling. He's like a smiling snowman.
Yeah.
I like this guy.
A KKK members.
Alright, Chris got it.
See this smile?
That's even scarier.
No? It makes him look like a snowman. Going into Christmas
You're
season.
weird, Daniel. Okay, anyway. I mean, historical context just keeps being reconstruction, right?
Yeah. I got you. Let's do it. I would love to help you with one question.
Mister, that's a nice
Hey, how about your stage? You answer the big question.
No, remember he said that this isn't, that the artist isn't like against, isn't like racist, he's just depicting what's actually happening.
The South knows they lost a number, and they're going to get their idea back.
Well, it's just like the alphabet.
It is exactly right. I agree. Well, good. This is back when Santos was good.
Mister, that's a nice snowman.
What?
That's a nice snowman.
Isn't it?
I know, right? Christmas season. He's in a ticket. It's a nice snowman, though. Think about it.
Is this from the white point of view, or is this from the white they looked at? Who is, like, think about, like, whose point of view is this drawn from?
Is that a Republican?
It's not from the KK's point of view. That's the context, yeah, that's good. Yeah, dogs.
Maybe that's how.
Just kidding, I don't make mistakes.
Bring awareness of this.
I know. It's a class racer. So, yeah, that's important. Credit mobile camera. Some of that we dealt in period 6.
Wait, what's the one? The other one with that?
The whiskey ring.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about this cartoon, because this is vivid, and it's dark, and it helps us understand what's really happening on the ground level of Reconstruction. Eliam, I'm going to give it to you first. What you got going on up here, man?
Well, I don't know, like,
Just talk to me about the cartoon.
what I took it was like the lost causes worse than slavery, saying that like them not knowing what to them, or just basically the white league and the KKK uniting is worse than for them. They have the ability and they're united in a movement of killing blacks and taking away their opportunity to learn and to make them worse than the poor white man.
Okay, good. Good. Brett, Bill, please.
I agree with Lillian.
Good.
I'd just like to add that basically the point of view is just saying that what's pro-white supremacy, or it's
The cartoon is?
not because it talks about white supremacy.
Yes, it does. Keep going.
But it shows how the KKK, how their motives were to make the blacks be in a condition that's worse than slavery.
Good. That these organizations in the South are uniting to try to make sure that they are keeping African Americans in a system that is worse than slavery.
And they're like burning down, like you see how they took a burning book, like with
We
alphabets.
have a burning schoolhouse in the corner,
Schoolhouse.
and a lynching. And a lynching. Absolutely. So, did the white people in the South not promise to do this after the Civil War? Yeah. And we read that in Carl Schurz's opinion, where he's like, the people are saying they're just waiting for their chance to make it work, to make freedom worse than slavery. The black people that were petitioning from Alexandria, Virginia on Tuesday said, please, if we don't have the military support, they're going to make our freedom worse than slavery. So Nast is pointing out that these Southern forces are uniting to try to keep African Americans subjugated. The line that I think is most important on here is, I think, also one of the least noticeable.
The Union as it was.
Whose line was that? I wrote it on the board for you on Tuesday.
I remember you said
The president. He says the Union as it was, the Constitution as it is. It's President Johnson. Who said, like, let's just put things back. The first cartoon said 35 states, not 26. The Union as it was. Let's put the country back together just like it was, leave the Constitution as it is, and just move forward with ourselves. So there is a subtle reference there to President Andrew Johnson as well, and his perspective of just putting things back together and moving forward. I know. It's my job. This is a white man's government. This idea of the lost cause. The South feel like they're going to get there. They're going to rise again. It comes from this lost cause ideology. They're joining in this idea of the lost cause to keep them worse than slavery. With things like intimidation, murder, burning down schools, keeping them uneducated. Absolutely. Imagine dressing up like this idiot, though.
Nice note, man.
Wait, there'll be a good reference to this in one of the watch that in here.
Christmas?
What?
the grip.
Yeah. No. There's a good reference to the KKK in a. Look, if he wants to answer his homework questions, he can answer them at home, or he can email me for help.
Yeah. Just ask us any question.
Yeah. Or there's a wild ass thing called the textbook. Read it.
That's why he gives us reading.
He came to class and his homework done today. I was in advisory. You can't lie to me today. Roger. What? Am I staying there? Who knows? Who knows? I wanted you guys to know that advisory is not the place for your homework. Advisory is the place to review your homework and finish your last couple of questions. To study and review. And you'll never know. You'll never know when I show up in that advisory. Do your homework. I'm always a couple steps ahead. Don't forget that. So, good cartoon. The point of view is obviously from the Northern Republican point of view, because it's making the white South look. Always think who looks like the victim, who looks guilty in the cartoon. Who does this cartoon make look bad? And in this case, who looks bad in this cartoon? Yeah, the KKK and the White League. So therefore, it has to be a cartoon of not that perspective. A lot of people I see like, oh yeah, this is from the KKK's perspective. Like, no, the KKK would never make themselves look bad in a cartoon. They would never make themselves look violent and evil in a cartoon. So Nast is a phenomenal person that we'll spend a lot of time looking at in period 6. This is entering into the golden age, if you will, of political cartoons, which, as you know, I should be very excited about.
Is there a downfall?
Is there a downfall of cartoons? No. So now things start to go a little sideways. Congress passed a couple acts that are a little questionable. And this might be something you guys are confused on with the homework, and that's okay. That's what I'm here for. Congress passes first the command of the army. Let me ask you something. Who's the commander-in-chief? Who's in charge of the army?
President.
The president at all times. And Congress is going to try to take that power away from the president. Why? Because they hate Johnson. But does Congress have the power to do that? It's questionable. So they're going to say that the president has to put all Reconstruction orders through the commander of the military, and the Congress will appoint the commander of the military. So it's taking away some of Johnson's military power, because they don't trust Johnson to do the right thing. Now, whether you trust Johnson or not, this is Congress taking some powers that aren't theirs from the executive branch. They've crossed the line, constitutionally speaking. The second one is more controversial. It's the Tenure of Office Act. Now, this is where it gets a little questionable. And I don't need you to know the legal specifics. But what it basically means is the president can't fire anybody in his cabinet. We know about the cabinet, Jackson in his cabinet, all the Secretary of State, Secretary of War, Secretary of the Treasury, all those people. The president can't fire them unless the Senate approves. Who controls the Senate right now? The radical Republicans. So they're trying to make sure that all the people that Lincoln put in power, Johnson doesn't fire and replace with more states' rights people. Are they right to do that? Yeah, probably. Is this legal? No. Johnson, those people work for Johnson. Johnson can fire whoever he wants. So the Tenure of Office Act means that anybody who Lincoln put in office in this cabinet, basically, because they have tenure, they've been there a while, Johnson can't fire them unless the Senate agrees. So both of these acts together, I don't need you to know a ton of the nitty-gritty specifics. What you need to know is both of them are trying to weaken the executive branch, to weaken the presidency. Why? Because they're in this conflict and this clash over Reconstruction. Trying to make for as weak of a presidency as possible. The big goal was to protect the radical Republican members of Lincoln's government. The big worry is this guy, Edwin Stanton. Look at him, he looks so dreamy. Have you guys a beard? Get some.
What?
So, Edwin Stanton is a radical Republican. He's the Secretary of War. And Johnson wants to get rid of him so he can put a more friendly to him Secretary of War there, because that's the guy that's in charge of the military in the South. Think about it. Right now, I'll draw it on the board for you if y'all get confused. President Johnson. In the president's cabinet is all these Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, like Hamilton, Jefferson back in the day. Yes, Clay, if you will, Secretary of everything. Under him is the Secretary of War. This is Stanton. Now, not Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Edwin Stanton. And this is the guy in charge of the military. And what's the military doing right now? Kind of important.
In the South?
In the South.
Yeah, they're in the South, and they're enforcing what?
Laws.
Yeah, they're enforcing Reconstruction. It's kind of a broader. So Johnson wants to get rid of this guy, not the whole position, sorry, get rid of this guy, and replace him with something more level to him who won't carry out all these actions in the South. Question for you, does Johnson have the right to fire a Secretary of War?
Yeah.
The guy works for the president. And the Senate is trying to take this away by saying the Senate approved this position in the first place, so if you want to fire him, the Senate should approve as well. Congress is getting a little questionable here. What happens instead, because this is a little questionable constitutionally, sorry, it's a hard word to say. What happens instead is Johnson says, screw it. That's an unconstitutional law, I'm firing him anyway. And Johnson fires him. Johnson says, you can't tell me who I can hire and fire in my own cabinet. I'm getting rid of this guy. He fires him. Johnson then goes and replaces all these generals under him, this level. This level, he replaces all the generals who are more loyal to him and the way he wants to do Reconstruction, which is much more lenient. Uh-oh, worrisome. And the House of Representatives is going to move immediately to impeach him. Now, a president, to get impeached, you need 2/3 of the House of Representatives. Does the House have that? Yeah, so they impeach him like, boom, done, sorry.
Really?
Yeah. Now, getting impeached is a very confusing thing for the American public. Getting impeached doesn't mean you get kicked out of office. The House impeaches you. That's basically the presidential equivalent of getting charged with a crime. They are charging him to remove him from office. The case goes to the Senate. And in the Senate, they are basically the judge and the jury. And they decide to remove him or not, also by a 2/3 majority. Do the Republicans have 2/3 in the Senate?
Yep.
Yes. Now, the Senate hears the trial, that's their job, they decide, and they vote, and they are 1 vote short of removing him from office. 1 vote short. And the only reason is some of the Republicans realize we don't want to set the precedent of removing a president just because you don't like what he did. That he's not done anything worthy of removal from office, he's just done stuff we don't agree with. So thank goodness, because it then ensures stability going forward, that the Senate gets a little bit of like, this. Okay, yeah, he's an idiot, yeah, he's done some things that are a little questionable, but he's not done anything worth removing from office. They don't want to establish this precedent that Congress just acts wild or kicks people out of the office, White House, whenever they feel like it. Not to mention, February 1868, what else is going to happen in 68? Yeah, there's an election. So they realize he's going to be gone in 10 months anyway. They can deal with it. They can deal with it. So, very important moment, but it really demonstrates this conflict that I showed you in the cartoon at the beginning of President versus Congress on Reconstruction. Here's my election. 1868. We have some states that are still unreconstructed. Texas is still not back in the Union. Mississippi's still not back in the Union. Virginia is still not back in the Union. They have not met the requirements. They refused to ratify the 14th and 15th Amendment. They're not doing their part. So Congress is like, cool, y'all can stay out. They don't get to vote in the presidential election, even though the war's been over for 3 years. All right, so what do you see on the map? What do we notice that's worth discussing potentially? Again, I'm just on the whole class period on election maps if you guys really want to. Okay, so take a minute and talk to your partner. What do you notice? What's noteworthy? What does this map tell us about society in 1868? That's the question. 1 minute, chat it out. Go for it. Yes, but
What?
Okay, there's two. Okay, it's Kentucky and Kansas. Kansas.
no.
Kansas was a state?
Oh, yeah. It was free, and then Kentucky was free.
Yeah.
Okay.
Carpetbaggers.
Wait, those are the scalawags,
Wow.
the south and the north.
Yeah. Scalawags are the southerners, carpetbaggers are the north. 13 seconds. I need answers. I want good answers. Leon? All right, that's it. So, I agree. Big 3 and Big C. Big 3 and Little C. Bounce back. Uh-huh. Because it helps when you do your homework, you know what's happening. Santos, talk to me. Instead of doing your homework over there. Kevin, what does this election map reveal about society in 1868?
So, I see it as less sectionalized,
Okay, I agree.
and Democrats would have more support from people, white Southerners and immigrants now.
Okay, so Democrats, very important. Democrats are still winning states they used to win. Democrats have been holding New York for a long time. That laboring class, that immigrant class. But look at this, we're starting to see some Democratic support back in the South. Is that a little worrisome for the Black South? A little bit. So Republicans still win overwhelmingly electoral college, but the popular vote's pretty close. 300,000 different. And we're starting to see some sprinkling of what society is going to look like post-Reconstruction. Now, turn your page. Grant's strategy in this election, Grant is who wins over Horatio Seymour. Grant's strategy is called waving the bloody shirt or waving the bloody flag. So talk to me. what is this strategy? It was in your reading. It's pretty specific. What is the strategy of waving the bloody shirt? Go ahead.
Talking about their experiences from the war. Like how we
Kind of.
fought the war, we lost a lot of blood.
Using the war for support.
What about using the war for support? Not war experiences. Not where was a hero.
The people.
How? There it is. To say, look, it's the Democrats that caused this war. Vote Republican. All the blood that was shed because of Democrats. Vote Republican.
Oh, vote as you shot.
Yeah, vote as you shot. Exactly. The idea being that it's the Democrats that caused the war. It's the Democrats that led us into the situation. Vote Republican. A cartoon tells the entire story. Not top 10, but good. Strong cartoon. Strong cartoon. So take 30 seconds with your partner. I'm not going to set a timer. What is this cartoon trying to demonstrate? How does this cartoon best demonstrate the waving the bloody shirt strategy? It's in your notes as well. But I spared no space today. The cartoon's all big so you guys can see them, you know. That's a good thing. Because there's less text and more cartoons. What do we got? Read the cartoon. It's always changed.
Why are we all over the question? Yeah, Daniel,
What is the show? What is it demonstrate?
Oh, Shanae!
CSA and then like the their depiction of like the difference.
I love all the noise over here in the
Does the difference between the North and the South change?
Huh?
Him in the North versus the South?
Backsliding on us,
Just
bro.
but a change of manner. So it's the same thing. Just with a different name.
Watch
Same
him.
question. Except it's like because of appearance, like in the first one,
I'm for sure.
Dumb. I'm like, what is
That's what I'm saying. He doesn't come up Thursdays. He doesn't pay attention in class. He's always after my running game. Okay, cool. All right. Why don't you run your ass to
Wasn't he was a general for the Union.
Good cartoon.
Grant.
Yeah, Grant is the general for the North
Yeah.
that wins the war. Now he's running for president.
But how is he wearing a Confederate?
He's not.
He's not.
He's not. So, what is this cartoon trying to get across? Linda, what do you think? This is a good cartoon. Okay.
The South or
Johnny, what do you think?
So, what I thought, I don't know what that meant was on the, is it Seymour?
Seymour. Okay, let's go back one. Who's Seymour?
Oh,
Okay, go ahead.
What I said is the other one that's waving the flag is more like for the America. They're mainly focused on that, and then the other one is that the other representative, he's like more UK, so like he's more like on the Southern's beliefs.
Okay. Look at the caption. Brenda, talk to me. I've never seen your hand raised that fast. Look at your just look at your shoulder. No, that's badass. I love it. Talk to me. Uh-huh. 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 Yeah. So what's really changed, according to the cartoon? Nothing. All we've changed, the same guy. We've gone from a Confederate States of America soldier to a KKK member. All that's changed is the banner that they're holding.
Alright, this is top 10.
I know, it's a good one. All right, this is in Brett's top 10. Nobody asked about Brett's top 10, which is excellent. So, no, it's good. I agree. It's a good one. All that's changed is the banner. 1864, the same people that are voting for Seymour and Blair were Confederate soldiers. Now they're just KKK Democrats. I know, it's going on. That's why I made all the cartoons big today, because they're all good. They're all big, right? This one's good and big. This one's good and big. Let's do one more.
So, Mister, if they're big, that means they're your tops.
What?
If they're big, they're your top.
I know. So I have another cartoon that also demonstrates the northern. Who's at the bottom of this cartoon?
Black person.
Yeah, a black person, a black veteran. And together we have the Irish immigrants, the Confederate States of America, and
Their nominee.
yeah, how does he look? He's a wealthy businessman. So together, wealthy business, the former Confederates, now KKK, and the Irish are, this is the Democratic base. Immigrants, vote Democrat. Confederates, vote Democrat. Wealthy New Yorkers, Fifth Avenue, vote Democrat. And they're together trampling on the rights of African Americans. Good cartoons. Now let's get through Grant's presidency and why Reconstruction then falls apart. Because we should be excited. What party is Grant from? Republican. He wins the presidency. We're ready to extend Reconstruction. We're in business. So Grant, as a Republican, he's a war hero. His cabinet is entirely corrupt. Grant himself is a man of very pure nature. This summer I read a 1,150-page biography on Grant.
You?
Yeah. So if you guys want to talk Grant, we can talk Grant, but that's more of an actual conversation.
Why would you read about him?
Because he's a fantastically interesting character.
He was a good guy.
Good guy. Good guy. Bad presidency. Not a bad president, bad presidency. He's too trusting. He's surrounded by people that are corrupt as hell. Now, that's not all his fault. Part of it's the context. This will make more sense in period 6, but this is the beginnings of the Gilded Age. This is the beginnings of mass industrialization. This is the first time we have a ton of money in politics and big business. You're embarrassing. This is, in terms of the time and place, this is the time in which there's more money in America. All that economic growth because of the Civil War all hits during his presidency. So people are swimming in more money they know what to do with, and they're using this money for a lot of corruption. But when the government's corrupt, what do people do? They blame it on him. So he, as a Republican, all these corruption and scandals come out, and everyone's like, oh, we can't trust the Republicans. Who's the party in charge of Reconstruction?
Republicans.
Exactly. So if you don't trust the government, and the government's doing this huge project of Reconstruction, all of a sudden you don't trust Reconstruction either. People begin to move away from the Republican Party because of all this corruption. Grant is generally ranked as one of the worst presidents in American history. I think it's a little bit unfair, but you can't. So, what happens in his presidency, first of all, he's a Civil War hero. He is looked at least in the 1860s and 70s, people put him on the same pedestal as Lincoln. That what saved the Union was Lincoln's presidency and Grant militarily. We don't look at Grant as a hero anymore, though. Why? What happened? His presidency happened. He has zero political experience. He's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Gullible is a good word. Naive. Naive politically. And what? And unlucky as well. And then the political corruption in D.C. begins to be called Grantism. Again, anytime your name gets used as a bad nickname, like Martin Van Ruin, right? It sucks. So everyone's like, oh, the Grantism in Washington, D.C. Well, yeah, that's not good for your political future. Under him, a couple important scandals, the two big ones, the Credit Mobilier scandal, in which Republican congressmen are being bribed, making a bunch of money off of a railroad scandal of like fake railroad companies that are supposed to be building Transcontinental Railroad that don't even exist. So a bunch of like shady business corruptions taking place. There's a tax on whiskey, and Republicans are being bribed to look the other way while people don't pay the tax. So Republicans around him are really shady, and then he himself kind of takes the political hit for it. Under him, we see the Amnesty Act of 1872, which gives amnesty or forgiveness to former Confederates. That's not good. And also under him, the Panic of 1873. The guy got a rough deal. Yes, sir.
Were they always this corrupt, even with Johnson?
No.
So how did it
Time and place. By the time we'll talk about that more in the Gilded Age, in period 6, industrial, like in terms of who's Johnson is really has his hands tied by Congress anyway. And at the time, we're more focused on the South. By this time, people are more worried about making money. Yeah.
So can you say that money buys?
You don't need to say Mr. and raise your hand. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like in term, and kind of you're doing the same thing, right?
All right.
Hey, Luis.
Alright. So
What?
No. All right. So can you say that in this situation, money buys power?
Money always buys power.
All right.
So unfortunately, this is making fun of his naivety. It's a good cartoon as well. We have a barrel, if you will. Barrels always have rings around them. A lot of the scandals are called rings at the time, like this ring of people doing this. The Tammany Hall ring, the Canal ring, the Whiskey ring, the Indy ring, the Press ring, the State ring. And here's Grant. I beg to repeat that these frauds in the government shall be probed to the very bottom. And here he is probing and realizing that now he looks like the idiot that's stuck in the barrel. So it's not that he's corrupt, he's not. It's that his entire administration is. So there's all this corruption, and then there's also a panic. When economic crisis happens, who do we blame?
President.
Yeah, the government in charge at the time, the Republicans. So the corruption and the financial panic are both going to kill the Republican Party. But they still get reelected in 1872. Grant gets elected on his war hero. The weight of the bloody shirt works one more time in 72. And then after that, not so much. So the Panic of 1873 is very important, very much worth knowing. It's a severe recession. This and 37 are probably the two worst in America's history at the time. This will be the worst until 1893. We have 2 million unemployed people out of 36 million, which is a large amount. But the big cause is always overextension of something. I've told you guys this before. The Republican split is kind of during this. We'll talk about that more in period 6. That's more of a politics of industrialism thing. So if you guys notice, like period 6 is going to start back in 1860. Economically, this period goes all the way to 1877 politically. So there's some overlap here. It's caused by all that Civil War currency I told you about. The printing of greenbacks and greenbacks and greenbacks. Now there's too much money in circulation. There's too much inflation. And because we've gone into a huge period of industrialization post-war, which happens after almost every war, industrialization continues from the war into post-war years, we've extended we have too many railroads. We haven't had an everyone's put all their money into railroads. That's the next big thing. Now there's more railroads than we need. So demand drops, people panic, literally, and it's the panic of 1873. But because Republicans are in charge at the time, people are increasingly going to turn to Democrats to solve their problems. Not because Democrats are better, because Democrats are different. Because Democrats are different. There are also, and I'm not going to go over each of these. I'll leave this as a slide that I think you guys should reference. It'll be online. But there also are a significant amount of court cases in which the Supreme Court is going to chip away at the effectiveness of Reconstruction. The Supreme Court is going to challenge how much power Congress should have over the states. We're back to that same argument. Ruling that no, it's the states that get to decide what citizens' rights are. Limiting the 14th Amendment. No, sorry, Maya Bradwell, you don't get to practice law, you're a woman, you don't get to be a lawyer. This is the female version of like Dred Scott versus Stanford. That we shouldn't be hearing this case, you're a woman anyway, so you don't need a license to practice law. Sorry. In U.S. versus Cruikshank, very importantly, the 14th Amendment only applies to the states discriminating. Businesses can discriminate if they want to. It's a private business's right. So all these court cases, what you should know is collectively, they're going to rule in favor of the states instead of the federal government. So what are these other states going to do? The Supreme Court's going to rule time after time in each of these cases that it should be a state that decides citizenship, a state that decides voting, a state that can't discriminate. But so what are all these other states going to do? Limit voting rights. So constitutionally speaking, all these court cases play a huge role in limiting how effective Reconstruction can even be. The Civil Rights Act of 1875, Congress passes at the very end of Reconstruction, which is supposed to give equal access to all public places, parks, schools, anything in public. There's no way to enforce it. The military's not there to enforce it necessarily. There's no way to enforce the law. But this law is only important, well, A, because nobody listens to it, and B, it's the last law passed by Congress to support civil rights until the 1950s. The next 75 years, basically, 80 years, we're going to have 0 laws passed for civil rights. 0. Before MLK. He's over it. So, thanks, John. So it's important to understand that it's partially the Supreme Court that is limiting how much power Reconstruction is going to have. That's one reason Reconstruction fails. Another big reason is Northern support wanes. What does waning mean? Yeah, to decrease. You know anything about the moon phases? There's the waxing and waning. Waxing is when the moon's getting bigger. Waning is when it gets smaller. The moon stays the same size though. You only just see part of it.
I know that.
Alright.
I know that.
Oh, Luis knew that. Yeah, of course I knew that. Duh. Google moon. So Northern support is going to wane for a variety of reasons. One is all this corruption. If you don't trust the government, why would you let the government undertake the biggest social project of all time and try to guarantee equality for black people? If you don't trust the government, why would you let the government do Reconstruction? So in this sense, this grantism, this corruption plays a huge role. Second is the Panic of 1873. If you're broke, what are you worried about?
Being broke.
Are you worried about it? You're already broke. Well, if the economy is struggling financially, what's the big focus? Yourself. Fixing the economy, fixing the financial situation. If the country is in crisis economically, do we really want to spend money ensuring black people are equal?
No.
No. People are worried about themselves, their own progress, their own opportunities. So when people are worried about the economy, Reconstruction takes a back burner. Why should we spend money on them? Keep in mind, the northern white people are still largely racist. Why would we spend all of our money on that? We put more of our military concern on western expansion and our last set of Indian wars. We're talking about in period 6. Like, why are we sending the military to the south to make sure black people are equal? We should be sending them to the west to kill Indians.
There's still Indians?
Oh, yeah. So our the Indian Removal Act, there's still a huge amount of Native American conflict here. As we're building railroads across, we're having Indian wars and conflicts. So that's more of a period 6 thing as well. But keep in mind, our military. Why would we send our military to punish Americans? We can be sending them to kill Indians. Priority 1. Next reason, monetary problems. We're worried about these greenbacks I told you about, and we're worried about the war bonds I told you about during the war. So the greenbacks and the war bonds are making people focus more about financial issues than the social and political issues of Reconstruction. Beautiful. So the thing that actually ends Reconstruction, even though you can argue Reconstruction was already kind of dead, like the Federalists, they're kind of dead, and then the Hartford Convention kills them extra dead. Yeah, or the Whigs, sure. Is this election of 1876? Or what will become known as the Compromise of 1877. So in it, we have 2 characters, Rutherford B. Hayes, phenomenal name. Rutherford. Running against Samuel Tilden. Rutherford B. Hayes is seen as boring, bland, unexciting, against a very exciting younger dude, Samuel Tilden. Now in this, look at the South now. The South votes entirely. Anybody else want to answer that question, or will I just snooze about it? Yeah. The South votes entirely Democrat.
Oh, United States.
Which means that maybe the black vote is being suppressed?
Oh.
Yes, maybe our intimidation aspects have worked. We're keeping, because black people are going to vote Republican. There's, in many states, more black people than white people. And in 3 states, there is what's called contested votes. Of course, South Carolina, Louisiana, and Florida. In those states, Republicans say they won, Democrats say they won. Republicans say they won because a lot of these states did not allow the black people to vote. So there's a big issue, and neither side can win. Neither side has a majority without these 3 states. It's very, very close. Some of the southern states are threatening to march on Washington, D.C. and have another civil war. Nobody wants that because they say, give us our president that we rightfully elected. So they create a commission, a group to decide who's going to get the votes from these 3 states. This group awards the votes to Hayes. Hayes, the Republican. Hayes gets the majority. The South is furious. Absolutely furious. Of course they are. So there's another strong cartoon. No. But this looks like the South's threat. They have a gun and a whip. And it says Tilden or blood. Who's Tilden? Yeah, give us Tilden as president, or there will be blood. Tilden you will have if elected, or blood you shall have if you shed any with a will. So there's this threat of the South that give us the president we elected, our Southern Democrat, or we're going to cause more trouble. Eventually, a compromise is reached literally right before inauguration. This goes from election day, November, December, January. There's this huge controversy. Who's going to be president? What the hell's going to happen? They reach what's called the Compromise of 1877, in which Hayes says, Southern delegates in the South, give me your support, and I'll take all the federal troops that are left out of the South. I'll take that U.S. Army presence that we've identified as the only reason the South's following laws. Take the U.S. Army out of the South. The Army that had been sent to supervise Reconstruction, to supervise the 14th Amendment, to oversee the 15th Amendment, to make sure that voting was allowed, to make sure that civil rights were encouraged, that Army is sent back to Washington, D.C. by President Rutherford B. Hayes as soon as he takes office. This effectively ends Reconstruction. Now you could argue Reconstruction was already kind of ending because the Army can't be everywhere at once, and these intimidation tactics are obviously quite evidence from this. So you could argue that Reconstruction, in a sense, is already kind of over. But this is kind of the last straw. In the South now, these Southern Democrats, these segregationists, are now in control. So Reconstruction's over. That was it. That was the big, bright, shining moment of American history in the first semester. The time in which we actually lived up to our beautiful beliefs that all men are created equal. And what happens, as I tell you guys all the time, the pendulum swings. We go from progress to the absolute opposite in the Jim Crow South. So why does Reconstruction end? Those legal challenges I told you about, all those court cases that chip away its effectiveness. Grant's presidency, he sucks. Poor Grant. The Panic of 1873, so there's a legal reason, a social reason in a sense, an economic reason, and then the military reason. The troops are gone. There's nobody there to enforce Reconstruction anymore. The most, however, it's harder to measure, but the biggest reason for all of this is that idea of waning support. The idea that you can't reconstruct a South that does not want to be reconstructed. You can rebuild buildings, you can build railroads, you can do all these things, but you can't change people's mindsets by passing laws in a 10-year period. You can change people's mindsets over time. And we can even see this evolution of northern attitude toward black people through the same, this is Thomas Nast, portraying this black veteran that should vote. And then here, 9 years later, portraying black people in Congress as animals and savage. So the same cartoonist is showing what's happened in society, from us believing in exalting black suffrage to what happens when we let black people into Congress. So even through these cartoons, we can see the way these views have evolved. So it ended because the Compromise in 1877 to solve this election problem. Hayes becomes president, military rule in the South. He appoints for the first time in 20 years a Southerner to his cabinet. And what we get instead is Jim Crow laws. These Southern states decided they're going to pass as many laws as possible to return African Americans to status of second-class citizen.
So they have like a mini era of good feelings stuff there?
Kind of. Yeah, you could argue that it's a mini era of good feelings. That's a good way to put it.
Reading is an era of good
Stealings. That would be more of a Gilded Age thing. That's Grant's presidency, the era of good stealings, of just taking as much money from it as possible. These Jim Crow laws of separating black and white is going to be upheld by the very important Supreme Court decision we'll talk about next unit of Plessy versus Ferguson, which upholds the institute of separate but equal. You can put black people in different schools, different buses, different water fountains, as long as the facilities are equal. But they never are, going to be equal. And upheld by the disenfranchisement for black people. Disenfranchisement. Now, in Southern society, they are, quote unquote, redeemed. They're able to intimidate black people from voting, use the KKK, use these leads, use economic intimidation, not leasing land to black people to vote, not employing black people to vote, keeping black people from voting. And when you let just white people vote, you get a white government society. Which gives us the birth of Jim Crow. Which is the last thing I'll go over. Now the South's able to get around the 15th Amendment, which said that everybody can vote. Is the 15th Amendment there that says that did the South get rid of that? No. They're going to find loopholes and ways around it, ways to keep black people from voting. The 3 ways you should know are poll taxes, charging people a tax to vote. Who does that hurt?
Black people.
Yeah, any poor people, but specifically poor black farmers who are sharecropping and therefore they have no cash and can't vote. With literacy tests, which are very unfair, making sure people can actually read to vote, but the tests, you'll see some in period 6, the tests themselves are inherently unfair or impossible to pass. Yeah. Name all the clauses of the Constitution. And the third are grandfather clauses. You can only vote in this county if your grandfather also voted in this county. Well, these black people are like, my grandfather was a slave. My father was a slave. I was a slave. Therefore, how are you expecting me to be able to vote under this grandfather? Oh, sorry, that's the rule. So the black society, the southern states are able to use this system of segregation to make sure they're reinforcing a system of subjugation. So on the back, I have, as promised, Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederacy. Alexander Stephens, who was the vice president of the Confederacy. Both of their views of the Civil War, now that the Civil War was over. So go ahead and read both those perspectives. Focus on the one on the right first. Read Stephens' first, because we read his cornerstone speech. Slavery and white supremacy is the foundation of our society. Well, he's going to say what the deal is now. So read his as I pass out your brief Thanksgiving break homework.